Don't all rush to the front at once. Council? Should we have a drum roll or something?
Gosh, for me, I doubt it. Oh, I've got the short person chair. Can I move one over here?
Sure.
Thanks.
All right. So, Council, and you're not in court. I thought maybe we wouldn't see you today.
Well, thanks to, for the record, Deputy City Attorney Jan Smokowitz, thanks to the great efforts of Judge Edelman and the cooperation and understanding and efforts of the ACLU, who's represented here today by Ms. Rodker, I see. Cool. We were able to hammer through some issues that we're continuing up to this point, I think, and resolving them today. Good progress has been made in implementation under the agreement I would submit. The department has worked through the policies that needed to be worked through in terms of the agreement. They've worked through the training efforts that need to be undertaken. They've organized the training materials, and we've been able to they've been able to get prepared for the training coming in January. And the Fire and Police Commission's made efforts in terms of working on their audit efforts and the like. The consultant is in place. The consultant has had a visit to the city, has met many of the chief players involved in the matter, and is in place and ready to do their work as well. So things, although they're a little bit behind some of the scheduling that had been anticipated in the initial agreement, we are making progress on all of the issues.
Okay. We welcome the ACLU people. Would you like to come forward and say a few words? It's up to you.
I'll even sit next to you, Jen.
Okay, that sounds great.
Karen Rodker.
Short chair, though.
Yeah, well. Karen Rodker, ACLU of Wisconsin. I also just want to recognize my colleague, Jarrett English, without whom a lot of this work would
And
never
I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name.
Jarrett English.
Okay.
Without whom a lot of this work, he's our assistant and community expert.
Very cool.
So I agree that we are making progress. I would say we probably are a little more on the side of concern about some of the delays that have occurred. I agree the city is working to make progress. We also want to ensure, and hope that the data collection piece of this, which is critical to the case, I understand there have been some bugs. We want to make sure that that is proceeding apace, and that the other pieces of it, a lot of which we have spent many months working on agreeing to, now go forward smoothly without further problems, so that there can be training and, incorporating the new policies into how business is done.
Okay.
And we did meet with the consultant as well, so.
And what kind of timeline are we talking about?
Well, this is a continuing effort over 5 years, as the committee is aware. We are continuing, I think, at least a couple of the SOPs, the standard operating procedures that needed to be changed have been presented to the Fire and Police Commission for their consideration. I think there are a couple of more that are before the union in terms of what's required with them. And then there are some more that we are working to complete in the next few days. So then we are talking about data collection. That's being worked out. I think that's something that's going to be done in the next months or weeks to come.
I would hope not months.
I hope not months.
I mean, the first data collection piece, which obviously we understand it was early, but it was due in October.
Yeah.
And that was not available. The next date is January 23rd, so we are hoping certainly by then it is taken care of. And by the way, Jen, there are 2 new policies that are already in your inbox.
Yes, I saw
from the meeting this morning.
Saw them.
But we, as I said, we have negotiated in good faith, and we understand there are some procedures with the union, but we are hoping that it goes quickly and smoothly without further delays. There are a number of delays on number of deadlines on January 23rd, and we are really hoping they are met.
Yep.
Very good. Comments by committee? I do look to our audience. Mr. Mosina, I know you had some questions. Would you like to address?
Oh, yeah, right.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. My name is Paul Muzina, and I appreciate this opportunity. And I certainly don't want to muddy the waters with my comments, but I would like to mention that 2 of the 8 standard operating procedures that are required to be updated by the settlement were brought before the Fire and Police Commission last Thursday. The Directed Patrol Missions, number 300, and the Fair and Impartial Policing, number 100. On the issue of the Directed Patrols SOP, on page 8 of the settlement, it calls out that that SOP should be updated to include clear, prohibit, achieve patrol objectives, to clearly prohibit traffic stops, field interviews, no action encounters, and frisks that are unsupported by requisite reasonable suspicion or are based on race, ethnicity, national origin, or other prohibited characteristics. That language, that SOP is supposed to be updated to include that language. The SOP that was presented to the Fire and Police Commission on Thursday simply removed references to saturation patrols. It does not include any of this language. And just as an overarching idea, the 2 SOPs that were brought before the Fire and Police Commission last Thursday, the public was not really informed as to what was the scope of them. And for example, was it advertised or purported to be the case that the updates to Standard Procedure number 300 would include the changes for the account settlement? We weren't told of that. We don't know. And then SOP number one, the Fair and Impartial Policing, that was the Appendix A of the settlement of the court order.
Sure.
That was, and so that was. I hope I'm not trying your patience, Chairman.
No.
That was called out and explicitly already agreed to in the Appendix A of the settlement agreement, and yet it finally came to the Fire and Police Commission last Thursday. Okay, that could have been brought forward in August, and again, we weren't told whether or not the changes that were in front of the Fire and Police Commission for consideration that night included. It was at the sum total of the ACLU settlement requirements, and Executive Director Butler did explain, yes, this is the exact document that was in the appendix. But what I'm alluding to is, how could the public know? How do we know what's going on? There wasn't any way of knowing it. So those are a couple issues, and I bear with me because there are a number of issues here that really need to be brought forward. So I mentioned Standard Operating Procedure 300 and 100 were brought for the first time. That's 2 of the 8. So contrary to what Deputy Attorney Smokowitz said, only 2 of the 8 SOPs have even been brought forward yet for the consideration of the Fire and Police Commission, and they've been held over for the next meeting. So that remains to be seen. And I don't think 300, it's not clear whether SOP 300 includes the changes that are required or not. Bear with me here. And I would ask that if, I know Ms. Roker and the ACLU team are busy, but if possible, can they communicate something or be present at FPC meetings when SOPs specific to the settlement are going to be talked about? It would be great if someone from the ACLU could be there and say, yes, we concurred with this. We signed off on this. That level of confirmation, I'm almost done. That level of confirmation wasn't provided to anyone. So I was wondering, wow, is the ACLU okay with this? We didn't know. And bear with me, as a couple more things. The fire department, excuse me. The police department has a significant challenge before them. They want to establish a unique subject identifier so that, if we find, Chris Lee on the street, that whether it's in the CAD system, the TRAC CS system, or the TriTech record management system, no matter what system it is, that we always know it was the Chris, so that when we go and want to do a report and we say, are the police harassing Chris? I wouldn't blame them if they did, but are they harassing Chris? And so they want to be able to search across the CAD system, the traffic system, and the record management system. And they have to produce a unique identifier and make it available for reporting purposes. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's a challenge. And one last thing, bear with me. If the training is going to proceed effectively per the deadlines, all the SOPs should be in the books. That is the time that the SOPs should be reviewed with the officers during the training. And so something's got to give here. Is the Milwaukee Police Department going to be able to prepare all the SOPs and proceed with the training on schedule? And I'm ready for a drink of water, so I better shut up. But I really appreciate your indulgence of letting me speak, and I'm willing to stand corrected. Please, I appreciate when I'm corrected, so I ask you to do so.
Well, first of all, Mr. Messina, I'll speak for myself. I've got incredible admiration for you, for your tenacity, your interest. You're at every one of these meetings. You email all of us. You clearly have an interest. And we should be grateful. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. I will tell you that the people before us, the people that are working on this, I trust them implicitly as far as them doing their jobs. And so I know that Executive Director Butler has come to the table. Ms. Butler, are you able to answer any of those inquiries on the SOP maybe?
I can try for some. Now, it's my understanding the language that you read from the settlement agreement is a summary in a sense of what the language should reflect per the change, but that's not necessarily the exact language that's going to appear in the SOP. The two attorneys can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's in essence trying to get at what the changes should reflect, not necessarily this is the exact language, with the exception of SOP 001, which was agreed to in its entirety. Now, at the previous Fire and Police Commission, he is right. It was presented, and I did tell the commission that it had already essentially been agreed to in the settlement agreement, but that settlement agreement also contains language that says that the commission has not given up its power to change the language or make suggestions as to what those SOPs should reflect, because that's one of its ultimate goals and obligations. So in that, the chair did raise an issue with some of the language in there as related to immigration status. That was talked about today during the agreements and during the negotiations earlier today, and I think we'll be able to come to some consensus on that and then propose, if necessary, a revised version of that SOP. As it relates to SOPs, generally when they come before the commission, we do typically put up kind of a red line version that shows exactly what changes are being made to the SOP. So, for example, SOP, the other one that was presented was 300, and it was the roll call version was put up with the changes reflected in it, and those are the sum total of the changes that are being presented to the commission. So, whenever the commission gets an SOP with changes from the police department, it has already been, the police department executive command staff has already gone through it. It has already gone to the union for meet and confer, which is required that it go to the unions for them to have input beforehand, and then it is sent to the commission for the commission to consider. And we typically try to put up, as much as we can, a public version that usually has track changes. In rare or limited circumstances when an SOP has to remain confidential, we will not put it up. But most of them are public, and this one was, and it was up with the suggested changes reflected. And so that's what we're going off of. We're going off the recommended changes. And again, the commission can adopt those changes whole cloth. They can take some and not others, or they could come up with new ones. That remains to be seen.
Okay, yeah.
I'm happy, and I want to thank Mr. Mosina, because I wouldn't have been at this. He was the one who flagged the meeting to me, so he's very tenacious. 001, I think we can resolve. The SOPs are not going to the FPC without, they are the product of negotiations that we have agreed to. Not all those principles. There are principles, the ones you read, which are likely to be in a different SOP. It's the same principles, it's just how they are structured. So we would be concerned if the language in the SOP that is now, in process were changed. But at this point, the language that is in the draft that is being considered through the internal processes is language that we have agreed to and we are comfortable with. I actually echoed your concerns, and Mr. Smokowitz has heard it, about if the SOPs are not final, how are we going to train on them? It has been indicated that the principles in the SOPs, even the non-final ones, will be trained on. We have not had time to review the training materials to make sure that is the case. We don't want a delay in training, and we will be looking at the training materials with an eye towards that. And I don't know if you have additional.
Okay. Other than to indicate that perhaps I was misheard there, but I did represent to the committee that 2 of the 8 were before the Fire and Police Commission at this point, not anymore at this point. And the other ones, at least some of them, are the subject of a meet and confer obligation with the unions. And yes, training, preparations for training, and planning for training, and the training materials themselves are proceeding apace. Everybody is attempting to do a lot of work in a relatively short period of time with a very aggressive schedule under the agreement. And we have had, Ms. Rotker would be the first person to tell you, we have had many exchanges back and forth in terms of language in the SOPs. Should it be this word or should it be that word? There's a word in there, not in there. The police department, none of us, we may be attorneys, but none of us are law enforcement officers, and none of us are personnel managers of large organizations like that. And we rely upon the police department to inform us, as they do, and in a good way, about the issues that need to be resolved with these language changes and the effects that we may not recognize as lawyers as opposed to managers. And I think everybody, and again, I want to genuinely say that the ACLU has been understanding and appreciative of these issues and has been willing to, when appropriate, change their thinking about certain proposals.
Okay, thank you.
And things are working apace.
Let me ask any committee members comments, questions? Briefly, Mr. Mosina.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comments, and I'm like I said, I'm willing to stand to be corrected when things are clarified. I was just raising my concerns, and I just want to reiterate one final concern would be that there be a standing agenda item at FPC meetings, at police crime and safety, police district crime and safety meetings, and in front of this committee, Chair. If you could entertain that idea, let's try to keep abreast of this as things go down, because I don't want to be a naysayer, but there are some serious IT challenges ahead, and it's going to require diligent paying attention, and I think it will rebuild trust between the defendants and the people of the city, if we can do that. So three standing committee, three standing agenda items. Pardon me. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Okay. Alderwoman Dodd makes a motion to receive and place on file, and seeing no objections, so ordered. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last item, number 18, 181053, is a communication from our Department of Administration, the Intergovernmental Relations Division, relating to city-county intergovernmental relations. And we welcome